This video is brought to you by viewers like you.
Hi, and welcome back to Pokemon Ecology. Today, we're going to be looking at Sandshrew and Sandslash and their Alolan variation. I'm really excited for this episode, but real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to all the support on the phylogenetic tree series. This is just the first episode of many, so within the next month, probably, I will be starting a stream where we will group the next group of mammals, and I will also put up a YouTube poll to vote on the next group, so keep an eye out for that. Without further ado, let's get into things. As always, we're going top down, and starting with the ears. The ears of Cantonian Sandshrew point roughly forward and outward, letting them focus forward without suffering too much with hearing behind them. Meanwhile, Alolan Sandshrew's ears are fully outward. It's plenty possible that they're able to move like a cat's, but it's consistently shown this way even in the anime. This means that Cantonian Sandshrews are a more dominant predator in their habitats, or at least don't need hearing to detect their predators, enabling the ears' use for hunting. However, this hints at a number of things for Alolan Sandshrew. It could be that their more rigid bodies just don't allow ear movement, and as such, side-facing ears become the default structure. This makes sense as it helps escape predators while, as I said earlier, it doesn't help too much with their predation. Could also be that their habitat more intensely demands awareness of predators and their surroundings. It hasn't been around for too many games, but Alolan Sandslash has more definite predators to deal with in its areas, with some exceptions justifying this theory. This is further justified in that it's harder to hide in a desert and somewhat so in a savanna than it is to hide on a rocky, snowy mountain where sight is less reliable. As for Sandslash's ears, it seems like their ears are hardened to match the back spines, meaning that Alolan Sandslash's ears may have indeed been too rigid to move. Their cheeks are somewhat pronounced. Wider jawbones like this indicate two possibilities. They're better at being hit, as seen in humans, and they also make food grinding easier, as also seen in humans, but more so in many rodent species, though this is usually seen in bigger cheeks rather than jaws. If I were to be able to say which is the case, I would need to see the skull to look at specific structures. Moving on, Alolan Sandshrew has this igloo head, likely for a similar reason to koalas. While the Cantonian subspecies is able to take falls quite well, likely an adaptation from attempted but failed hunts from Skarmory, Pharaoh, and the like, by rolling into a ball, Alolan Sandshrew can't do so. While aerial predators are much less common, they still live on a mountain, and this helmet probably cushions cranial impacts when they fall. These Pokemon have a wide and low stance, at least the Cantonian ones do. This gives a good center of mass for a number of things like fighting that real-life pangolins probably don't care about. The Alolan forms look a little bit thicker, probably to insulate from the cold. One cool thing to note, Sandslash's actual torso is pretty small and very well protected, surrounded on many sides by sharp quills and protected on the front by formidable claws. In regards to the scales, Sandshrew is obviously based on a pangolin, so these plates on their back are most likely based on pangolin scales. However, when they evolve, they take a form more similar to porcupine's quills. What if I told you it could be both? Porcupine quills are hairs coated in a thick layer of keratin. Pangolin scales are also keratin. It's very likely that these plates stay low to the body as young to allow them to hide better but strengthen and lengthen as they become adults to protect themselves in fights better. In the case of Alolan Sandslash, this will be a metal spike around which frost grows. Regardless, for both, keratin or ice grows onto hair or metal to protect them as they age and fight. The plate growths as young are low to the body to protect against bites when curled, much like real-life pangolins. It also reduces the required size of their burrows. They're able to fit in much smaller places. Sandslash likely uses them to protect against back hits while they defend their front with their claws. Also, in Cantonian Sandslash, its separation from the body enables the quills to act a bit like shock absorbers. Surprisingly, porcupines also have quill adaptations for when they fall. It's not shock absorbers, but porcupine quills have a strong antibiotic property, as presumably, porcupines falling from trees would sometimes be jabbed by their own quills, and this antibiotic property protects them from infection. Cantonian Sandslash's scales are insulating. They curl up into a ball shape on hot days to protect their insides from the heat, so presumably these catch and hold heat away from their body. Alolan Sandslash's quills are kind of the opposite and are particularly nasty. They gather ice on them, and the inflicted wounds are both large and frostbitten, making predators think twice before attacking. The arms of Sandshrew are short and stubby, with 3 claws on the front. One, unfortunately, seems to undevelop as they age, because we can never get a Pokemon that just has normal digits. As young, their claws are short, but their arms are thick. This gives them a good amount of arm strength, but I can't imagine those claws are very efficient at digging burrows. It's not improbable that these Pokemon have a disconnect from the ecology of their real-life inspirations, though, where pangolins will dig burrows for themselves that other animals may use later. It may be that other Pokemon dig burrows that Sandshrew will eventually come to use. Based on their arm pose, it may be that these claws help to hold prey still while they eat. Sandslash's claws are able to regrow daily, meaning their body likely produces its own keratin, either in great quantities or with dietary assistance, especially considering the plates on their bodies. Whatever they eat must be plentiful in these relevant proteins. Perhaps their diet is largely invertebrates. Cantonian Sandslash use their claws for quite a bit, and this is evident by their prominent size. Combat is an obvious use, as hinted at by their stance in the official art. Their arms seem to naturally sit at an inward angle, hinting that, just like Sandshrew's, their claws are notably used to hold onto prey. Therefore, it's likely not fighting anything larger than itself, just what it can take down during its ambushes. Digging may be less often done when they're fully developed. These claws are awfully long and sharp for digging, as stubbier claws are preferred for that. Instead, they're most likely for climbing. Cantonian Sandslash hide in trees to ambush prey when as a nymph it hid in burrows, and Alolan Sandslash is overtly stated to use its claws for climbing in its Pokedex entry in Ultra Moon. That being said, we do see Alolan Sandslash digging small holes to hide, presumably from the nearby threats of Weavile in New Pokemon Snap. These legs look a good bit like the last normal video subject's leg, and for a very similar reason. Sandshrews are springing out of burrows to catch unsuspecting prey. Sandslash are bolting around when they fight. This is just like Gibble and Gabite. Interestingly, the whole line has very long toe claws. With Alolan Sandshrew and Sandslash, it makes sense, especially paired with these flatter, wider feet. In Cantonian Sandslash, it may use them to kick up sand when running. In Cantonian Sandshrew, I'm unsure. My theory is that they stick these in the ground to act as brakes when rolling down hills and dunes. However, that's only a guess. It's hard to say for sure. And finally, with anatomy, I thought about mentioning the tail, but it's really not interesting. It helps with balance and is short and stubby to make a more reinforced ball shape. Talking about their behavior, Cantonian Sandshrew and Sandslash have developed a serious aversion to moisture. When their skin is moist, they head to a sunning or heating spot to dry out. Cantonian Sandshrew has an entry stating that its body can absorb water without waste. I take this to mean they're like our real-life kangaroo rats, whose moisture absorption is so excellent that A, they urinate paste, and B, drinking water can be lethal to them. Considering their habitation away from water, I'd be surprised if Sandshrew didn't have this sort of adaptation. Alolan Sandshrew and Sandslash aren't stated to have something of this sort, but snow is not particularly drinkable, so this behavior may be retained. Cantonian Sandshrew roll through deserts at high speeds. Believe it or not, this does happen in real life. Pangolins do actually roll into balls and have been observed moving away and covering decent distances. In Sandshrew's case, it's not stated why this is done. Predators are unlikely due to their burrowing habits though. This could be done to avoid inclement weather, a la rainstorms or sandstorms, or it could be chasing prey migrations as well. It's also possible that these animals just claim a large home range, similar to our real-life wolverines or badgers. Sandslashes kick up sand when wanting to hide, presumably when picking a fight with a too formidable opponent. Considering they're ambush predators, one would think that there will be a sizing up of opponents before engagements. They're not unique in doing this though. Elephants will kick up dust storms in attempts to intimidate predators and other elephants. For them it's mostly intimidation, but Sandslash uses this to hide, and Alolan Sandslashes may do this to buy time while they bury themselves and leave only their lethal spikes exposed. Sandshrews are shown in the anime to mark territory with claw marks, and they live in small groups. I wonder if this behavior is specific for Alolan Sandshrew, considering the lands they inhabit seem more hostile, on top of the striking lack of food, meaning that they and their progeny can work together for food while fighting off other Sandshrews with different genetics. Now, addressing the elephant in the room, Speciation. Sandslash apparently came to live on a snowy mountain after a volcanic eruption long ago. Just how long isn't stated, but Cantonian Sandslashes aren't around anymore. Speciation in real life takes long periods of physical disconnect, though can be as little as a few generations in some rare cases. But that's real life speciation, where the animal looks almost identical regardless. These Pokemon have since undergone a large biological change, leaving me to wonder what caused the separation and how long these two populations were separated. What may have happened is that long ago, these Pokemon resided in the Haina Desert of Ula Ula Island when it was still connected to mainland Kanto or a nearby region. At some point, the tectonic plates underneath began to shift and drift the island out to sea, forming Alola. During this time, it's likely that nearby volcanoes, perhaps Wela, would have erupted violently enough to threaten the Pokemon of the Haina Desert. The Sandshrew populations would have fled the disaster up the mountains and into the snowy cliffs. By the time the eruption had settled, the land below would have been destroyed, leaving no food further down the mountain, effectively stranding them in the cold. Depending on the eruption's strength, it could have taken decades or longer for plants to begin regenerating, let alone establishing as a food source, especially on an island. One massive hole in this theory: an eruption large enough to wipe out nearby islands would have wiped out all nearby islands, and not just this one, though we don't see similar speciation. Massive hole number 2. The Haina Desert is elevated above the rest of the terrain. It wouldn't have been destroyed by the eruption unless that eruption would have caused what I just stated. Massive hole number 3. Speciation between species members can happen within generations, but serious morphological differences take incomprehensible amounts of time to form. While this is Pokemon, they've evolved iron growths, though that's only a couple ingredients away from keratinous growths, I suppose. Moving on to their diet. I've stated earlier that they likely eat invertebrates. This is because insects are high in protein, which is necessary for keratin construction. However, I have a second very likely diet for them: Geodudes. Their anatomy doesn't support this. We would expect to see large fangs or claws to break them open, but their body construction does. Cantonian Sandshrew doesn't have any specific material named for their hide, but Alolan Sandshrew does: steel. Alolan Geodude's body is magnetic and collects iron sand from its environment. It's also found on the same island as Alolan Sandshrew, and I'd hazard a guess that it too lives in caves. Because Alolan Sandshrew is likely to eat them, one could reasonably extrapolate that Cantonian Sandshrew would also predate them in their natural habitats, similar to how coyotes everywhere will always have an appetite for the local rabbit population. Sandshrew's body type is made for rolling into a ball, but it also conveniently fits a Geodude well into their grips. Unfortunately, the teeth would make or break this theory. If they're large enough for crushing or
and good for healing and chipping, then it's reasonable. As it stands now, it's just a fun pet theory. And finally, their role as another creature's diet. Lichen Rock are shown to chase, presumably with the intent to predate, Cantonian Sandshrew in new Pokemon Snap. So while Sandshrew are able to roll up and protect themselves, they are on the menu for Lichen Rock. Sneasel and Weavile are also predators of the Alolan subspecies. Its shell protects it from the younger and experienced former, but the latter is able to access and attack the soft underbelly. Other than these, the Ekans and Spirulines show up commonly. Ekans likely sneaks up and attacks Sandshrew before they're able to cover their softer areas and administers venom. Fearow likely uses its large beak to pierce through the line's defenses, though that's not a guarantee. And Scraggy, Shinx, and Sandile also show up with relative frequency in its habitat, though I can't imagine they're able to break through the shell.
And that was Sandshrew. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and massive shout out to my patrons, Malon Sale, whose sheer force of will could will in any Pokemon game to existence. Let's hope they get something good for the next Pokemon Day. And shout out to Niall as well, who has the opposite problem, where 4 tiles in Mount Coronet are unable to catch a Feebas on any given day. Anyway, the next video is going to be about Goomy, Sliggoo, and Goodra, as well as their Hisuian forms, and vote in the poll for the video after that. Thank you, and have a great day.